Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ghislain Nkeramugaba, and I'm your host today for the West Africa Peering Forum 2021, and I'm delighted to be here. On the agenda today, we have a good program. Today, we will be looking at the peering and interconnection ecosystem in West Africa. Our first panelist will give a brief on the current situation as far as IXP concerned. We will delve into building large infrastructure communication, where we will have Ndiogou from Orange and Ben Roberts from Liquid Intelligent Technologies. We'll move forward and talk about security with Team Cymru. Brian Davenport is on the team today to talk about security. And we will finish with Aderemi, who will be talking about cloud infrastructure. So next, the objective of the meeting today is really to look at what can we do as people interested in peering and interconnection in West Africa, what can be done to improve networks, connectivity, and push high-speed and reliable, resilient internet to the people who are still underserved at a low cost as much as possible. That's the reason why we are looking at a large spectrum of things today. We want to thank our sponsors. Flex Optics is the simultaneous interpretation service provider or the sponsor for the service sponsor. And we want to say a big thank you to Flex Optics. We are as well thanking PAX, Afrinic, Main One, Rack Center, Facebook, and Team Cymru as well to sponsor this event and making it possible. A very big thank you to you who are representing those organizations here. So the speakers we have today, we have Muhammed Rudman. Muhammed Rudman is the CEO and the founder of IXP Nigeria. He will be the one giving his first remarks. Then we will have Ndiogou and Ben Roberts, Liquid Intelligent Technology. We will have Brian Davenport from Team Cymru, and we will have as well Aderemi and Adejumo from Cloudflex. So without further ado, let me ask the technical team to put the first slide and request Muhammed to take the floor to go through his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ghislain. Before I proceed, I'm so delighted since we are from West Africa. I'm delighted with what ISOC is doing here today, bringing in all the various stakeholders from the different West African countries to engage with them regarding improvement of interconnectivity and peering, localization of data and all that. You've been doing a fantastic job in the African region, but focusing on West Africa now, it's something that gladdened our hearts. So thank you so much, Ghislain, and all the team behind you in ISOC. Thank you so much. West Africa is one of the 5 regions of Africa, and there are 16 countries in the region. And out of those 16 countries, there are 13 countries that have IXPs. In fact, in the last 10 years, there were only 3 IXPs, Nigeria, Ghana, but now, with what ISOC is doing, and African Union, we have seen significant improvement. And we now have 13 internet exchange points and 3 other countries that do not have, Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, and Niger. So about 19% of West African countries do not have an exchange point. I put Sierra Leone there, even though it was recently launched. So in some records, you might not necessarily find it. This is to just show us what is possible in the system in different countries. Of course, Nigeria is leading the way with 271 autonomous system numbers from Afrinic, and the total of around 252. West Africa is the second in Africa because South Africa is the highest. South African region is the highest with over 800 autonomous system numbers. And East Africa is the third with around 316 autonomous system numbers. Below, you see the graph of the growth of those autonomous numbers over the years from 2006. And that was the Yeah, that some of the West African countries starts to establish internet exchange points. Like, for example, Nigeria, we commenced in 2006. Most of them started around that period. And that's when some of the smaller service providers started acquiring autonomous system numbers just to peer at the various exchanges. So this is the total traffic from all the various exchange points. We have around 355 gigabits per second, and that is the total for the region. If you compare it with other regions of Africa, it's only South Africa that is ahead of this region when it comes to traffic. That's because of NAP Africa and the Johannesburg exchange and other exchanges there in South Africa. So that's just to give us an idea of the traffic within the region and the traffic for each country. So Nigeria has the highest population, so of course it has the highest figures, followed by Ghana, which has around 80 gigabits per second. Then you have Burkina Faso that has around 11 gigabits, while the rest all small traffic. Okay, so that is just it. It's just to give a background to the peering ecosystem in West Africa, the countries that have exchange points and the ones that do not have. Thank you so much, Ghislain. Thank you. I'll be available for questions.
Thank you, Muhammed, for your remarks. Yes, there are still work to be done in those countries where we don't have exchange point, because it is the beginning of the peering and interconnection. It starts there first, and then later on it moves into a bigger ecosystem.
Our next speaker is going to talk about the project by Orange in West Africa, and I would like to hand over to Ndiogou just now, who is going to talk to us about the project. And over to you, Ndiogou. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak. I'm the expert from Orange in this area, and as you said, I'm going to talk about the project Joliba. It's a project that aims to connect the main capitals of West Africa. And therefore, it's a major project that we began to connect the cities in Africa using underwater sea cables. So I'm going to provide some key information, and then I'm going to talk about the current situation in West Africa, then opportunities that are available from the Joliba project. So this is the current situation in West Africa. There are already some connections in South Africa and East Africa. We've already been mentioned. And in East Africa, there is a lot of, but we noticed there wasn't an integrated network. And the Orange is aiming, therefore, to connect the capitals in this region. So we're going to hopefully connect the countries in Burkina Faso and Mali. So these are the opportunities that are available. The aim is to secure the network using the regional backbone. So we aim to make these networks secure in the possibility of resolving problems arising from land cables being broken. So this project is aiming to develop the ecosystem. We want to improve the client experience in the region. We want to create an integrated system without going through operators. So we had to do it country by country using national operators. And that was very difficult. There were lots of people taking part and had something to say. To go from Dakar without any interruption, it was a difficult project. So here are the advantages offered by Joliba. As I said, fiber optic cable through underwater sea cable. So the traffic will travel on the underwater cables, but that way would only be one point of contact to create a connection between Dakar to Nigeria and reduce the problems. And we're very committed to quality, and also if we are able to deal with problems relating to the cable, on the underwater cable. And We create locally managed networks in Senegal. So here you can see the architecture of 10,000 kilometers of fiber optic cable. So 2,569 kilometers in Mali, 3,353 kilometers in Ivory Coast, and Burkina 955 kilometers. So we're looking at 10 gigabytes POPs in each country. From in Dakar, Medina. We have some in Mali as well. In terms of the Ivory Coast, we have other POPs, and Burkina Faso, we're also present there. And Ouagadougou, on the border with Ghana, we have other points of presence there. At Accra, RAC Africa, and the Lagos RAC Centre. And of course, there are other sites in other countries. But in terms of the project, these are the countries where we're doing the most work on the project. Here you can see how we have connected the cables and the cables on the over land, the underwater sea cables. We've also connected the Ivory Coast to Burkina Faso. And we can see that we've done this through the cities that are on the border. And from Guinea, we can go to Ghana and then on to Nigeria. And of course, there is a underwater cable that links these. So there are 3 ways of connecting this network. So here you can see the structure of the network, which is made up of IP equipment that are interconnected. That's the IP network that's going to give us sufficient transmission capacity and an interconnection between the various countries. So you can see the route that the connectivity takes from right to Nigeria from Senegal. And this is a WDM architecture, and it's based on the same principle for cables and fiber optic cables that have been deployed in different countries. And it goes from Senegal to Mali, Cote d'Ivoire, the Ivory Coast, and potentially on to Liberia and Sierra Leone. You will see that in the following slides. So Joliba is what it can offer at the moment in terms of 85 POPs available across the world and 13 POPs in Africa. So our strategy for growth has allowed us to create a connectivity in this area of Africa and go from Dakar to Nigeria. These are the areas that we have created the connectivity. It's been a very good strategy in Africa. It's a more dedicated and singular approach. Before, it was difficult to create links between countries. It was each operator, we had to negotiate with each operator. And obviously, there were issues of competition. But thanks to this implementation, we are able to provide a transmission network that connects these countries much more easily, either using an international private line or a EVPL and 100 gigabyte transmission level. So these show you the solutions that Orange are able to deploy using Joliba, with allowing free access to mobile data thanks to these networks. And the networks will be far more extensive in Africa. And of course, all of the services will benefit from Orange's portfolio of security. This is how things were before. So if there was a client or an operator in Dakar, for example, they had to go down to connect in order to connect to Ouagadougou. They had to go through the different operators, and they had to negotiate with Sonatel or other operators to connect through this link. Each operator had to negotiate with operators in every country, and they had no choice about who they had to negotiate with. And therefore, we have overcome these problems, these difficulties. Yeah. And now this is the Joliba network. You can see that we have created a cluster, and therefore it's a centralized network that we can offer from Senegal, the Ivory Coast, onto Nigeria, end-to-end network. And the network is able to, it's one single connectivity network with one single point of contact. And thanks to Joliba, it's possible to be connected in this area of Africa, and it's very simple to negotiate the transmission and the access and connectivity. And that's Joliba is not going to stop there. It will continue to other countries, the Liberia and Sierra Leone and Mauritania. So that would be the next phase, and this will be an integrated network in 2022. At the end of 2022, we hope to have a fully integrated network over those countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You've even answered a question already about Liberia, which was asked in the chat, and you've answered that. It's going to be dealt with. Thank you very much indeed, Ndiogou. You can have a look at the questions in the Q&A and perhaps answer them directly, and then we will have an opportunity to ask more questions.
Hi, thank you, Ghislain, and welcome everybody. So my name is Ben Roberts, and I'm with Liquid Telecom. So I really want to talk about Mombasa Kinshasa. We've recently changed our name from Liquid Telecommunications to Liquid Intelligent Technologies. Internally, we call ourselves LIT for short. So today I'll be talking to say Mombasa to Kinshasa is lit, LIT, and I'll be suggesting that Africa is no longer a dark continent. I said some of these things before, but just recap. We've seen a few trends during the pandemic of traffic on the internet. We've seen traffic shifting from people using internet in the offices quite a lot to people using internet at home. But more importantly, we've seen a big uptick in collaboration, and this is use internally of an application, Microsoft Teams and Office 365. But we've seen a huge uptick from everybody in using calling and video and other forms of collaboration, file sharing, as we are working in new different ways in the pandemic. And even this webinar is a demonstration of this. We wouldn't have been doing this 2 years ago. We would have gone and we'll be meeting in Lagos or Abidjan or something for this meeting. So it's a demonstration of what we're doing. And so traffic on the internet is shifting between networks, but it's being exchanged at IXPs between the consumer networks, the business networks. But traffic is predominantly shifting to cloud, and IXPs are being used to exchange traffic between operators with eyeballs and cloud. The new normal has exposed the digital divide, but it's made us as humans transform in the way that we do things. We have had to adapt. And for those of us that were quite digital anyway, we've changed our digital habits, put it that way. I'm going to just recap because I'm going to talk about latency and the laws of physics. It's pretty simple theories and some constants, which basically tell you what the RTT, the latency is. It's a factor of distance. So if you have a glass, you have a factor of index of glass, and that's about 2/3 the speed of light. And the delay is really caused by the distance between 2 points on the network. There's a couple of physicists here, Isaac and Newton, but underneath that is Captain Scott of the Slice Enterprise, and he was an engineer. They did a lot of great engineering things, but he recognized that you can't change the laws of physics. So in 2018, I talked about Mombasa Kinshasa. I talked about Cape to Cairo, but I mentioned this about how traffic was routing across Africa, east to west. This is 3 years ago. And back then, although it was only about 4,000 kilometers, the shortest route from Mombasa to Kinshasa, it is taking a lot longer than it should be 38 milliseconds, that latency by distance, but taking a lot longer. Traffic was coming from Mombasa. It was heading north to Europe. It was going into France and then going into London and then back round to Kinshasa that way and back to London. So we were seeing traffic being exchanged in Europe, but more importantly as well, between English-speaking and French-speaking countries, we're seeing traffic passing through both Paris and London in particular. So that was taking about 300 milliseconds of latency. So it should have been 40 milliseconds and it's taking nearly 300. So things have changed and moved on, and we've been busy with building some infrastructure. We're working very hard on east-west routes, but there's about 3 that we're really working on across the continent. But the southern east-west route is complete, which is going all the way from Kinshasa to Lubumbashi. That is then going into Zambia and into Tanzania, so crossing Africa that way. We're working on a pink route, which you see there, which is between Kinanga and Rwanda, and to Goma and Rwanda, which will make it even shorter. But just on the left, you've got a picture of Africa at night, and this is the lights coming from street lamps and other things. And these new routes are really crossing large areas which are not completely dark, but pretty dark, not as dark as Sahara. We're lighting up fibers through areas which actually quite highly populated, but they have big spaces in between of uninhabited land or dense forests, which are causing some, which have hindered in the progress of building infrastructure, put it that way. So, the roads and other infrastructures across these regions have been underdeveloped. So now this is what has changed in terms of that latency. This is the route that is active, the southern route, which is from Kinshasa to Lubumbashi to Zambia and back to Dar es Salaam and to Mombasa that way. It's now about 62 milliseconds. So according to the theory and the laws of physics, the minimum it could possibly be is 50 milliseconds. Obviously, signaling equipment, IP equipment, and MPLS equipment adds on a bit of time and delay to any packets. But we're really getting quite close to that. And then when that route from Kinanga to Goma is complete, that was knock 1,000 kilometers off the distance, and it will definitely knock it down below 50 milliseconds. Now that is a big difference from 300. It's from satellite-like latencies to 50 milliseconds. It means you can play internet games with each other, multiplayer video games. You can do other things that were not available with the high latencies that were there. Now, as well as reducing latency, these new routes that we've been deploying are impacting millions of people by addressing gaps in what we call the first mile and the middle mile. The first mile is the sort of main routes to get from subsea cables or peering points to the main cities. So in South Sudan last year, we first got into Juba with the first fiber into Juba, so addressing the first mile issue. But in the DRC case, that route we're building from Kinanga to Goma, it's accessing cities in Mbuji Mai, Kasongo, Kindu, Bukavu. Now, these are not small places. These are not villages. These are places with over 1 million people, some of these places. Certainly Kinanga and Mbuji Mai, they're very populous settlements and large places that have never had fiber before. They've only relied on satellites and high latency. Again, Juba is the capital city of South Sudan. It's really making a difference on the middle mile. It comes with some challenges. And just mentioning Juba, I haven't got any pictures of this to show, but I've mentioned before, we had to do quite a lot of demining on the routes. There was a lot of unexploded artillery from recent conflict that had prevented such infrastructure being built. Then, in DRC, we have some quite enormous river crossings to do here. And there are no bridges on this particular river here. We're looking at using pylons to cross some of these rivers. It's more than a kilometer. This is not even the River Congo. This is near, I forget which city, but anyways, it's quite over a kilometer of water we have to cross with fiber optic cable. Sort of things we've done before. But when we're doing things like this, although we are crossing with fiber, and we have been deploying and using this free space optics technology, what we call FSOC. Now, we used this some years ago to cross the Limpopo River, but now the bandwidths available on this technology are much higher, and the radios or the devices we're using on free space optics are capable of doing 2 times 10 gigabits per second. So very high bandwidth to cover over short distances, much more capacity than you can get with the radio links. And then the other picture on the right is this is the N2 route. This is the route that we're taking from Kananga to Goma, and this is a bridge along that route. So we're building fiber in roads, in areas where roads have not yet been constructed. I think at some point roads will come. There's been a lot of infrastructure development across the continent, but this is some of the engineering challenges we're having to solve. And we announced last week that this route is being built in partnership with Facebook, and obviously one of our sponsors today. And part of the partnership we have with Facebook is just working together to solve these challenges. And they've got some good engineers at Facebook, and they've got even techniques of satellite imagery and artificial intelligence that adding skills to what we can do with our people on the ground and our knowledge and experience of building fiber. So working together in partnership to solve some of these massive challenges that we have to deal with. But I'm going to come back to digital divide. One of my favorite subjects at the moment is talking about education as the key to unlock rural connectivity. But much as we're doing developments all the time in the first mile, middle mile, there's a lot of development needs to be done on what we call the last mile, which is connecting up villages, communities, people, and schools. We've done a lot of work in this regard, but I think the pandemic exposed the digital divide, but no more so than in education. So it's definitely our aim to carry on connecting universities and to try and impact all the schools that we can connect. And part of what we're doing, which is unique on the DRC projects, we have a schools mapping project where we're mapping out all the schools in the area where we operate. But as we're building the fiber in DRC, our contractors on the ground, they're not only building fiber, but they're also collecting data to tell us where the schools are. All the schools that are near the fiber, we're mapping those out and showing their proximity to the fiber with an aim to getting them connected. So we will obviously put the fiber in first, but where we are, so we have the information, we have the data, so that we can sustainably get connectivity to those settlements that are close to the fiber, not leaving anyone behind. Where we're building long distance fiber, is going for a small village, passing a school. We don't want to leave that community unconnected. Then the big impact of the kind of mega trends that's going on within African networks is that globally there are a lot of cloud on-ramps, and cloud is expanding and is being invested in the continent. We're seeing investments in Cape Town and Joburg, where you've got hyperscale cloud being developed. We're also seeing in other cities like Lagos, Mombasa, Nairobi, Cape Town are also being points of edge caches where global cloud providers are putting in edge caches to tap into data. All this is part of the development, and having the east-west routes, it's not just about connecting those areas that are unconnected, but it's going to enable users in Lagos, in Kinshasa, in anywhere in West Africa to access those routes, to access cloud servers in Nairobi, Mombasa, United Arab Emirates, Middle East, via the shortest possible route. It's going to be speeding up and reducing the time it takes to transmit packets. It's going to increase our quality of experience when using cloud. Then the 2020 figures from Telegeography are showing a gradual expansion of the intra-African traffic. We're seeing still in the West African perspective, a lot of traffic flowing between Nigeria and Ghana. And I think the figures that Muhammed showed for the capacities in the internet exchanges, I think are proof to this. I was very surprised and interested to see how much traffic is being exchanged in Burkina Faso. So that was unexpected for me. But we're starting to see more of the West African traffic being inter-exchanged between the countries, and the Orange network will be developing that as well. But what is going to happen is that as cloud is going to be developing in those major cities, cloud will be developing in Lagos, in Kenya, in South Africa, more cloud coming. We'll see more and more of these routes. We'll see more traffic flowing West Africa, particularly Nigeria to Kenya, but we'll see DRC to Kenya as well, all using these paths, these superhighways. It's not just about Congo, these routes, so it's going to be influencing all the way that traffic flows. And I think in about 2014, there were some subsea cable cuts in the Red Sea, and multiple cables were cut. And at that time, we called up CCOM and we asked them to move all of our capacity that we had going from East Africa to Europe. We moved all that capacity to between East Africa and South Africa. And these events that have happened have changed the way that the traffic have flowed. And I'll probably predict that at some point, cables going from West Africa towards Europe will probably get cut. And then we might see a shift, change in behavior, or West African networks will suddenly start sourcing their internet from South Africa, from Kenya. We need more interconnection between the big networks and big backbones in the region. But then just lastly, I want to touch upon digital trade and digital innovation. I think what excites me most, and we talk about the Africa Free Trade Agreement, but all these emerging tech startups are coming up, and they are doing business and growing the digital economy in their own environments. And I think the future that is going to be afforded by this intra-African connectivity is going to be enabling Nigerian tech companies to sell and spread their services to East Africa, to Southern Africa. And I think for me, that's the exciting point. Other industries like banking as well will benefit from this, but for me, this is the growth area that is going to be fueling the growth of future networks. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to having good questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben. It's really packed, and it's full of questions, and probably you mentioned, and that will be probably a question to think about, but it will be my first question when you go in the Q&A. So you talked about the civil engineering challenges. So should we assume that all the other challenges like cross-border are no longer there? Those are the things that we want to know more when we go into the Q&A session. Just for me not to eat too much of the time on the presentation, let me welcome Brian Davenport from Team Cymru, who will just give us his presentation on security. We talked about infrastructure. Ben touched a little bit about cloud solutions. So how do we secure all these and exchange point? Brian, over to you to talk about what Team Cymru is doing. Thank you.
So first of all, thank you for having me on. And I was just looking, over 100 attendees. So that's like really awesome for the first one of these. So again, thank you all for your time. So just myself, we'll go through this really quick, but I'm part of the outreach team here at Team Cymru. And basically what we do is webinars like this, and we build free tools for the community, right? So who doesn't love free stuff? Team Cymru in and of itself has multiple divisions, which I'll talk a little bit about, but really we're gonna focus on how you can use the free offerings that the outreach team has built as an IXP or an ISP to help secure your infrastructure and kind of what that means. I do have a dog, and normally you'd see the dog sleeping behind me, but I have the green screen up today, so I get the background going. All right, so outreach. So free tools are awesome. We have 2 more that are going to be announced soon that we've been working on. But the really popular ones for ISPs are the Bogon reference, which we have. So we grab all of the IP addresses that shouldn't be allowed out on the internet. So you can think of like private addresses or addresses that have not yet been, registered, and basically provide that as a list you can download. So people use that for traffic filtering, right? So not allowing Bogons on the internet. It's a free service. You can peer with us to grab the list, and it's really popular. People sign up for it every day. Nimbus is one that we have recently built. And what we saw was there's a lot of like enterprise grade or even open source NetFlow collectors that you have to build yourself. But we thought we had a really interesting place to fit by offering a free flow collector. And really, if you don't know much about Team Cymru, that's fine. But the enterprise side of it, or I guess the part of the company that keeps the lights on, right, and sells product, really has a really high fidelity host reputation list. So it's regarded as one of the best in the world. You can think like antivirus vendors or firewall vendors might subscribe to that list in order to OEM it into their product. What Nimbus does is it allows for that particular ISP to get the host reputation list for free in reference to the IP addresses that they transport, right? So basically, think if you're an internet service provider, all of the traffic that's going across your network, you can compare to these enterprise grade host reputation lists for free and get alerting for it. And it'll also give you some statistics on peering information. But really, it's the goal there with most of these products is to give away or give back to the community in a way that they can get some of this technology that's sometimes prohibitively expensive for free. And from a service provider, it's great because you can provide downstream reporting to your customers, or if you're an IXP, right? And a lot of the people that are peered with you are utilizing something like Nimbus. it's a way to monitor all the bad traffic and try to reduce that. So more bandwidth for everybody. And then unwanted traffic removal service, or UDRS. Again, DDoS mitigation can be very expensive. This is a community DDoS mitigation project that has close to 2,000 members, or 2,000 ISPs would be a better way to say that, and some very large ones, which we're very thankful for participating in it. But you can think of it as like remote trigger black hole, but a little more global, where Team Cymru just facilitates it as the steward of the announcements. So internet service provider A or entity A is under a DDoS attack. They can make a BGP announcement to Team Cymru, and then we basically propagate that BGP announcement out to everybody within the UDRS ecosystem, and then locally they'll black hole the traffic. So it gives you all this traffic that's flowing across the internet that shouldn't be. It gives us the ability to cut it off locally at each ISP that's participating in UDRS. We have UDRS 2.0 coming out, which is going to add a lot more features like flow spec and some more IPv6 support. Yeah, but totally, teamcymru.com, go to community services. It's all free to use. Feel free to sign up for it and check it out. And definitely, if you have any questions about anything, feel free to put it in the Q&A. Also for CSerts, so this is one of the ways we try to make the internet a better place as well, is anybody that's a national cert will actually give them the entire reputation list for their region, so their whole constituency. So it gives them kind of the ability to see, for the people that are within our organization, what kind of bad traffic are they producing? And then there's an ability where they can send daily reports to the people within their constituency to help them gain visibility into the traffic. We also do some consulting with them on best practices and stuff like that. So the CSERT assistance program is really just a way for Team Cymru to extend their reach out there. And then we host a bunch of events. So there's 4 major ones a year. We try to go to locations throughout the world. It's been a little difficult, obviously, with COVID. So we're doing a RISE event in the US this year, but we will have our underground economy event abroad. But we do a bunch of webinars, stuff like this. You can find about all of that stuff on our website to see what we're up to. And then there's just a mail list that you can subscribe to, which is a way to just inform the community about what's happening in the information security space. So it's a once a day email, and you'll get topics of what we're seeing happening. We try to keep it just lightweight, bullet points. Here's what's going on. You can see the different things you get alerting on. It is vetted. So there's like an approval process to get on it, but not too prohibitive. So if you sign up with a legitimate email address and we're able to figure out that you're a real person, you'll likely be added to Dragon News Bites. And I encourage you to do that. And then the last slide is just a little bit about Team Cymru. As I mentioned, there is a outreach division, which is really cool because our job is to create free solutions and give them away and then interact with the community. And it's really interesting to work for a company that, was founded by people that helped build the internet and wanted to, dedicate a portion of the company to give back to that. But there also is, of course, running any business, there's things that Team Cymru sells. So there's a whole kind of enterprise grade of different software that's available there as well. But it's mostly for like enterprise customers, whereas outreach is more focused on internet service providers or internet exchanges or the community as a whole. So that was quick. I got 2 minutes left here. What I will do again is just say thank you. There's a couple of helpful links there. If you're interested in Nimbus at all, again, it's for collecting NetFlow, but NetFlow is a very generic term. So NetFlow, SFlow, JFlow, all that stuff. If you have any questions at all about NetFlow, I've been working with that protocol for about a decade, so I can help you configure devices, understand what it looks like, show you how the data is correlated to the lists, all that kind of stuff. I do that very frequently in my day-to-day. Take a look at UDRS, which is our DDoS mitigation project. Again, we got about 2,000 people in it today. Everybody that joins, the better it gets, right? Because it's a community-driven DDoS mitigation portion. And then connect with us on social media. And if you're on LinkedIn, there's 100 people out there. If you find me on LinkedIn and connect with me, I love seeing who I'm presenting to or talking with out there. Just, I think in that the previous presenter was saying how it's like this new normal of we're doing a lot more webinars. So it's always nice doing these things in the past, or you could do them face to face. It's nice to actually see the people out there. So if you are on LinkedIn, definitely send me a connection request. I try to only post meaningful stuff when I do post, so I won't spam you. But that's really it. So I got it done in 9 minutes. Thank you all. I'm going to stop sharing my slides.
Thank you, Brian, for these insights. I think the community, the Exchange Point community, will be very glad to work with you more, and I think they will benefit from it, and the whole ecosystem will benefit from it. Thank you very much. Last but not least, let me welcome Aderemi Adejumo, the CEO of Cloudflex, a cloud service provider in Nigeria. He'll be talking more about building cloud infrastructure in Africa, their experience, lessons learned. I think as well, Ben mentioned that we are going cloud. So let's hear from someone who has already started. Aderemi, the floor is yours.
Hi, Ghislain, thank you so much. Cloudflex started in 2016. The idea was that we wanted to set up a cloud locally in Nigeria. And this was long before COVID, but we just felt that there wasn't anything like that here in this region. And we wanted to put something here so that at least we can have something that's local to our market and also to the region. So we started the Rack Center. It's actually quite interesting because when we send out information and we try and describe to people, they don't believe we have data centers in Nigeria, and they don't believe that we have international grade data centers in Nigeria. We have Rack Center as well as others in there. So we started the Rack Center. We went for Huawei equipment because of the cost, and we chose VMware as a hypervisor layer. So we built two cloud platforms. One is in Rack Center, the other one, which is a tier 3 data center. We built the second one in Cloud Exchange, which is a tier 4 data center. And our third platform is going to be in the next month or two, which is going to be in Liquid Telecom Africa Data Center. They're building a new data center in Nigeria. So we're going to be in there. The reason behind that and the strategy is to open us up into the African markets, because as the previous speaker spoke, what Liquid is doing, Liquid Intelligent Technologies are doing, is to interconnect Africa. And so by us being on their platform, it's just our gateway into Africa and the African market. The other thing mentioned about the fintech platform and businesses in Africa is you have a business based in Nigeria that wants to do business in East Africa. So we want to be able to take advantage of that connectivity, that we will have a platform for Nigerian businesses and they can do business in these other countries with the connectivity as that is developing. So that's the idea behind that. We're also VMware verified. We have a DevOps platform. I put this slide in just to show the reason and the benefits of us being with VMware, because VMware don't see themselves as a cloud platform as much as they have platforms within platforms. So they are existing in all the platforms available. So AWS, Azure, Google, IBM, and so on. So there's an interconnectivity and the ability to interchange and the cloud platform from all these different players in the market. Ghislain mentioned about the challenges of building a cloud platform in Nigeria. The market is more leaning towards the hyperscalers to Azure and AWS. But for us here in Nigeria, what we try to do is build something local. So we take advantage of being local. I think it was Brian talking about the latency and all that. So we have a latency of less than 50 milliseconds, thanks to what Muhammed Rudman talked about in terms of the IXP and the interconnectivity in Nigeria. Without IXP, and our traffic would be routed to Europe before coming back to somebody who is sitting in Nigeria as well. But with the IXP in Nigeria, our traffic is local and it's reduced our latency to less than 50 milliseconds, much better in some networks, depending on what we have there. What I did was to put the subsea map in here to show what it looks like. There are about 8 of these available in Nigeria at the moment. And what that does is that reduces the cost of internet in Nigeria. And I think the next slide shows the next 2 that are coming up, which is quite interesting, which is the one by Google and Facebook, which I believe is going to further push back the markets. And it's quite interesting that you have 2 companies that are cable, and I think I would say without debt. So what's happening is that I think that's going to make the prices actually come to be quite interesting. And also as the fact that the world sees Africa as the next large market, there is that huge investment in these sort of capacities and these sort of things coming in conjunction with what Liquid Intelligent Technologies are doing as well. So what you have, the interconnectivity from the world, connectivity within Africa, I think it's making the future of Africa rather interesting, and also greater connectivity. So this is just a table showing the data centers we have in Nigeria, because again, as I said, people are not really aware of the development of data centers in Nigeria, and without the data centers, we can't have a cloud platform in Nigeria. So we're dependent on this, and the fact that there's a lot of investments in here and a lot of international standard data centers in Nigeria makes it quite easy for us to develop and grow our cloud platform. This is just showing the tiering and the definition of the tiering. This is quite interesting because one thing I always say whenever I give these talks is to talk about our experience with Rack Center. We've been there for 6 years. We've not had a minute of downtime with them. So I think it's a testament of the quality and what has been done in Nigeria, and of the team, that they're able to give us such a platform and give us such uninterrupted service. So this is just showing what we did with our cloud platform. Basically, you have again, people always interchange between cloud platform and the data center. We have our hardware in the data center, we have a hypervisor layer, and we have our VMs in there. Our ecosystem is working with Rack Center, Cloud Exchange, and Africa Data Center, which is Liquid Intelligent Technologies. We use Huawei hardware, as I said, because of the cost and because they have engineers on ground, so we feel comfortable with the support we get from them. We use VMware for our hypervisor layer. We use Veeam for our backup. We use Cloudian for our S3 storage. We have an S3 platform there so that we can provide services like that in terms of backup, archiving, and any data storage requirements that are required on there. And we use Fortinet for our edge firewall. Even though VMware has its own firewall infrastructure internally, we have this as a secondary firewall. And the reason for this also is that it allows us to give virtual domains to our customers and hand over the control of the firewall, the edge firewall, to them, and for them to be able to do their own configuration and have a degree of independence from us. So that's just showing more of the cloud architecture. So this is just showing VMware bought Bitnami, the marketplace. So this is showing our DevOps infrastructure and DevOps setup we have. We've set up the containerization and Kubernetes facilities on our platform. And we have a couple of customers that have development teams that are using our platform for their development. That's just showing more of VMware's stack. So these are the services we provide: structure, backup as a service, storage, archiving, disaster recovery as a service. We have the 2 data centers we have interconnected. So we provide a primary and backup cloud platform on that. Again, one of the things talking about the challenges and the development is that we use local connectivity partners to provide the interconnectivity between the data centers and also with our customers. The large customers have their own dedicated VPN onto our platform, and the smaller customers just go through internet to get onto the platform. So just showing the advantages of the local cloud platform. There's a lot of talk around the data sovereignty and data localization, even though it's not been enforced in Nigeria at the moment. Data latency, as I mentioned before, we have very good latency out to Europe is about 200 plus milliseconds, where we have less than 50 milliseconds. One of the differences between us and the companies, the hyperscalers, is that we don't charge, or should I say the connectivity companies don't charge for the egress costs. One of the things we've seen is that we've had a devaluation of nearly 60% this year in Nigeria. So because we operate in a local currency, we are able to maintain our prices. Cloud is moving from, it's the other way around, moving from CapEx to OpEx, and you pay for what you use. And one of the developments I see in the future is what this is talking about, the local repositories, that there's no local repository in Nigeria for music, talking about the Spotify type or Apple Music type things. They're not local. Nothing for our films. Most of the local films, Nollywood films are the 3rd largest in the world, but all that, majority of that is sitting on YouTube rather than a local platform. Large data sets, talking about machine learning, artificial intelligence and such. In order to develop such things, there must be large data sets locally with local data that this will be used for. And also credit agencies. We have dispersed credit agencies in Nigeria, nothing with a reflection of the country or with the region. So just showing the different things, the companies that have a local cloud and the international companies in comparison with that. Next slide. the economics, again, I think some of the things I've mentioned and what's mentioned by other speakers about the working from home and increased requirements of cloud infrastructure. We've seen a growth in requirements, a growth in people coming on board over the last 18 months because of COVID, and we're provisioning more and more in terms of that, and there's an improvement of our infrastructure, as mentioned by the other speakers as well, the connectivity within Nigeria, connectivity within Africa, and also the expansion of the data centers. Just to round off, I had a slide showing the investment across Africa in Nigeria, investment in rack center, investment that Liquid Telecom are bringing into Nigeria with the data center, and the other companies doing the same as well. So there's a growth, there's an investment coming in. The challenges are not enough of the government giving us the support, not enough of a lot of the cloud is going outside of Africa rather than in Africa. I think one of the speakers mentioned about them just putting edge devices in Africa so that they reduce their latency to them, but really there's no proper infrastructure of cloud in Africa like that, apart from what we and some of the other smaller companies are doing to provide cloud computing in Nigeria and also in the rest in the region as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Aderemi, for your presentation and insight on cloud services. I think it's very insightful. We are going to run a poll, but not now, but I wanted just probably to ask one or two questions for clarification as far as the cloud is concerned, and then probably we can run the poll in the next 1 or 2 minutes. So Ben mentioned that about us going cloud. Aderemi mentioned that there are advantages to sit in Africa and serve the market in Africa. So what I want to know is, because cloud and the digital services, it's a value chain. So what challenges are you encountering in building cloud infrastructure and bringing music on board, movie, all those industries on the platform? So what is being done to bring those industries on those platforms? Because you can build the nicest platform, but how can you put those industries on those platforms? What are the challenges that we are meeting?
I very much enjoyed Aderemi's presentation, and what he's talking about is absolutely critical. And it's big data sets that you want to have. You need to have local cloud everywhere. So every country in Africa is going to have local cloud entrepreneurs like this. And big hypercloud guys, they are there with public cloud, but they're not going to come to every single country in a very short time. But filling the cloud is the key. And talking of music and stuff, I think getting in the consumer space, not many people are necessarily used to paying for digital services. Even music, a lot of people might buy music very cheaply. They're just buying CDs on the roadside and stuff like this. You look at a company like Iroko, and I know Jason Ndiogou talks a lot about most of his revenues coming from the USA, coming from diaspora who are listening to African music. But definitely, there's a lot of content, music content, film content coming out of West Africa that can be shared across the whole continent as a marketplace. And I think, it's a good opportunity, but it's just about getting people used to paying or finding other business models. So there are companies like Madundo who are doing music, and they're doing it more on advertising funding. So it's just looking for alternative business models that are going to make sure that performers get paid. But ultimately, people are putting their content on YouTube and they're getting no revenue back from this. So they're putting this on music platforms that are being hosted in private cloud, like Aderemi's cloud, then they can monetize their content, since we want to see.
Okay, monetization and business models. Aderemi, do you have something to say about the question, or did you hear about the question?
No, I didn't hear the question. So if you just...
So I was saying, as cloud platforms are being built, so how do we bring those industries on those platforms? What challenges are you meeting to bring the music, the film, all those industries on those platforms?
That's something that needs to be done, but it's not something that can be done by the cloud platform only, because the cloud platform can put the music or the films on there, but the outlets and the delivery. So take Nigeria. Nigeria is a country of 200 million. People who have that monthly subscription of the internet and have all these services and have access to YouTube are less than 5 million of the 200 million. So when you look at our GDP per capita of $2,000 a year, we don't have that fund to be able to do that. So the way to get to them is through the telcos. But the telcos are not providing that platform to get to the masses for that and to make it a viable system at the moment. So that's where the battle is, or where the bottleneck is. And once that is solved, then you will get that audience, and you will be able to make it worthwhile to monetize having a platform for that within country.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I think we're going to run a poll quickly. If the team can help me, we're going to run a poll. So we have a question, yeah, it is both in English and in French. It says, in your view, what constitutes the biggest challenge to develop a peering and interconnection ecosystem in West Africa? So you will have to answer, what do you think is the main challenge? Lack of capacity, lack of investment, lack of enabling policies, lack of coordination among the member states. You can poll and you can let it run for a few minutes, a few seconds. Few more seconds. Okay. So
is it because of the lack of capacity building? Is it lack of capacity building and training programs, lack of investments, lack of enabling policies and regulations, lack of coordination among the member states that constitutes the biggest challenge? We're interested in your opinion on this question.
So lack of capacity, 9%, lack of investment, 35%. People think it is a lack of investment, 33% people think that it is a regulation issue, and lack of coordination, it is 22% of the attendants that think. So the two highest one we have is a lack of investment and lack of policies. Probably to ask the panelists, we've seen the civil engineering challenge from one perspective, but what are the other challenges that you think can help develop the peering and interconnection ecosystem in West Africa? A general question for all the panelists. Feel free to start, whoever wants, Rudman, or Ben, or Brian, or Aderemi.
Okay, if I may, this is Muhammed. It's actually a combination of not only one. That's why maybe the poll that you are seeing, you see those responses. It's a combination of some of, or almost all of the above that you mentioned, the lack of capacity building. If you look at it, for some of the smaller countries in West Africa, for some do not even have exchange point. Some of them do not have the competent people to even begin to set up the exchange point. I believe as ISOC, you are aware of that, and that is why you are providing capacity building. You go onto sites to build exchanges. For some is that you go to some of the African countries, they have the major incumbent operator, usually owned by the government, and they really don't care about peering and interconnection. To them, everything is working fine. The more people are going on transit, the better. To some is also the lack of enabling environment. The policy makers, the decision makers, especially the regulators, really do not care. For some, you have to get licensing to set up an exchange point. For some of the countries, you don't need any license. You can just set up an exchange point. And across borders is the last one, is the lack of coordination among member states. Because, for example, in West Africa region, we have what is called WATRA, the West African Association of Telecommunication Regulators, where all the regulators coordinate. But in terms of real work that they do in this peering ecosystem, I have not seen any. They are mostly focused on the regulation of the telecommunication companies. They have not really looked into the internet, the peering ecosystem, and how it works. And that's why we're trying to reach out to government in Nigeria, for example. Right now, our regulators are the ones chairing the WATRA, and we are hoping that maybe they will create a summit within the ecosystem in terms of this peering and interconnection, because some of the challenges we identified is that the cost of transmission capacity between the African countries is extremely high. Sometimes it's much higher than going to the internet, and therefore there is no justification for any African region to connect to the Nigerian IXP because of the high cost of the transmission capacity. Usually it's up to 80% to over 100% of the cost of transit that you would have paid. So I think it's a combination to me, if you ask me. That's why you didn't see, you can see 35, 35, 20. So it's a combination of almost all, if I may say so.
Okay. Thank you, Muhammad. Anyone wants to take it up?
Yeah, I would add to the policy side. I would say consistency in principles of data protection and ideas around data sovereignty would be key for me. And ultimately, where we see inward-looking data sovereignty policies, where a regulation comes out says you must keep all your data here in this building, in this country, in this city, they are bad for the development of the ecosystem. And I think even certain services that we've seen being banned, bird apps that we've seen being banned in Nigeria, again, can be retrogressive. And when we look at historical ICT policy, it has been there from before, and it's about controlling access to information. It's about limiting the number of players, about limiting the number of people who had phone lines. Over the course of the last 30 years in Africa, we've seen a deregulation. We've seen more competition opening up, South Africa, Kenya opening up in a big way. But more countries in West Africa are having a smaller number of players. Countries like Ethiopia as well are now opening up. So it's the opening up that changes the landscape. And Muhammed mentioned WATRA, and I remember that former AFPIF or WATRA representative saying that regulators in West Africa were different. They were there to protect the incumbents, basically, is what he said. And while that is the case, nothing is going to change. And we are seeing developments. We're seeing what Orange have done connecting countries is good, but ultimately more countries with more competition is going to be the best way forward, because then you get more players to peer and interconnect and you get a bigger growing digital economy ecosystem.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. I think let's go into the audience. We have some questions that are opening up. We have a question from, I don't see the person, but it is, what are the key benefits of Joliba project to the national government and the IXPs in the West Africa region, and how much bandwidth is it availing within the Joliba West Africa?
What are the benefits of Joliba for IXPs in West Africa, and what is the transmission capacity, the bandwidth? I think you said 100 giga, 10 by 10. Is that right? But also, what are the advantages of Joliba?
The other question was about Liberia. I think that one was answered. Question to Muhammed Rudman. Do you see more exchange point coming up in West Africa like we have in South Africa, Kenya? What will be the impact of this? That's a question for Muhammed.
Depends on the country's maturity when it comes to the ecosystem, the peering ecosystem. So NAB Africa, for example, is the first one to set up a private kind of an exchange, not a community-based driven exchange in South Africa, because South African ecosystem has significantly developed. So you now see it in Kenya, you now have it in Nigeria. And of course, as the ecosystem matures, more opportunities comes, and therefore you will see private exchanges where you will see the big exchanges, global exchanges having presence in some of the African countries. So I can say, yes, if there is an opportunity and the industry has significantly matured, and then there is a gap that is not addressed by the existing exchange points, because usually those new exchanges are set up to address a gap. So I will urge the existing exchange points in Africa to ensure that there is no gap by providing world standard services, and therefore that there is no gap or opportunity for others to set up. But no matter how you do it, some data centers will come up with exchange points, so it's very possible. I hope I answered this question.
Thank you, Muhammad. There is a question from Andrew Basket. Do you have statistics on the end-to-end reliability of the West Africa Orange network? So there are many questions about Joliba, but unfortunately, Ndiogou is not available. Okay, there is a question from Watara. I think it's for Ben. What are the challenges of Liquid Mombasa? Is it a service that other countries can benefit from? Are you intending to diverge from your hub-to-hub links? Are you planning to include other countries in your planning?
Very much, yeah. West Africa is the big push to expand in West Africa, but also adding in other countries that are not part of the network. Yeah, so we see a lot of potential growth. We've got a lot of border links that are crossing into countries where we're not present, like Malawi as well. We're seeing a lot of expansion.
Okay, I think those are the questions that we have. Probably I have a question for Brian. So you mentioned about the collaboration with Exchange Point, building a secure environment. So what's the process? So they write to you and then you respond back, or you go through a process into deploying into an Exchange Point and so on and so forth. So take us through the process that you go about joining an Exchange Point.
Yeah. So I think one of the cool things is, so if we're talking about just like the NetFlow collector portion, right? So part of, I think, what Team Cymru does really well is some discussion about an ISP might be running a very small staff or might not have the money available to purchase some kind of like enterprise solutions, or might not even know like how to configure NetFlow or something along those lines. So what's nice with the Team Cymru solutions is they're cloud hosted. So you don't have to deploy things on premises or spin up virtual appliances or do any of that. In order to sign up for a service, typically what we do is like an ISP, or if we have like an internet exchange point that wants to advertise Nimbus to their customers or whatever, or if you're just an ISP that's part of an exchange, typically they would go to the website and fill out, a form. What's your ASN? What's your IP address? All that kind of stuff. Then, because we do incur a cost for each Nimbus we spin up, there's a little bit of vetting to make sure it's like an actual internet service provider. But from there, we just create a collector and they send NetFlow data into it, and they get like a Kibana interface to explore the traffic, and everybody's data is their own data. So it's pretty cool. And then for Bogon or others, it's just a peering session with us that you sign up. But it's really just a matter of signing up on the website in order to do that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, if Ndiogou is not with us, maybe I can try and answer. There is a question: what are the statistics for the end-to-end reliability from one country to another in the Joliba Orange network? What is the degree of security of the system, the network? I don't have all the statistics to answer this question fully, but I'm sure Ndiogou will be able to answer it directly later on in the Q&A and provide all the relevant statistics. In terms of availability, with the level of resilience that we achieve, we connect the POPs. The reliability is pretty good, but sometimes a function of meteorological disturbances and what about presence on an exchange point? On how many IXPs is Joliba present? In the case of Burkina, there are 2 POPs that are connected. So that's the two IXPs, the 2 POPs in Burkina. Hello. Sorry. Hello, Ghislain. I had a technical problem. I think that Jean-Baptiste was able to answer the questions, but thank you very much.
So we are reaching the end of the session, and I want really to thank everyone, all our speakers. I don't know if you have a few seconds, your parting remarks, 1 or 2 last parting remarks, few seconds as we are concluding.
This is Brian with Team Cymru. I just want to say thank you all for your time, and a bunch of people connected with me on LinkedIn, so that's awesome. So thank you for doing that, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Brian. Ben?
Yeah, I just want to say having this kind of regional event is good, because we've got some sort of gaps in intra-regional peering, and this West African region is one good example. And I think it's great to bring the conversation down at regional level as well as the conversations we have at continental level. So well done for the initiative of this event to ISOC and sponsors.
Thank you. Muhammed, and Aderemi.
Yes, okay. I just want to echo what Ben said. We're doing these discussions at the regional level. Thank you, ISOC, for organizing this. And thanks to the audience, the huge number of people that participated, and some of them are still here. Thank you so much for joining this session. Looking forward to seeing you again when there is another program for the West African region. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Aderemi?
Thank you, Ghislain and team, for the opportunity. And it's been educational for me, hearing from the other speakers as well and understanding a bit more about the region. And I look forward to the growth of the region in every facet that we've talked about today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Ndiogou?
I think this was really interesting. We've learned a lot through the various presentations, and we hope that West Africa will be well connected, because it's important that all major African capitals be connected, because it will help us to connect the more remote areas as well and the landlocked areas.
Thank you all, the panelists. I want as well to thank the sponsors of the event, Afrique, main one, Flex Optics, the simultaneous service sponsor, Rack Center, Facebook, Team Cymru, and PAX. Thank you very much. The discussion is continuing, and I want to bring to your attention the forthcoming event. We have the virtual peering series. They are a little bit, they are different from the regional peering series, which are focused on region. The virtual peering series are focused on the whole continent of Africa. We have the 11th event coming up on 3rd of August, 1300 UTC. And we have as well another event, the Africa Peering Series Africa 12 event that will happen 2nd of November 2021, the same time, 1300. We have good panelists coming up. We have a very good set of panelists. The theme is about peer-to-peer post-pandemic. What is the future of handshake peering? We have speakers from EuroIX. We have Rebecca from EuroIX. We have Esther from NICS CZ. We have Yolandi from Terraco Data Environment. And we have Neo from the DRC, who is managing Kinix and forthcoming Goma and Lubumbashi Internet Exchange Point as well. So we have the sponsors for that event, FlexOptic, Facebook, PAX, NAP Africa, and Microsoft, that as well supporting that event. So on that, I want to say thank you for everyone. Sorry, we've been a few minutes on the time that was allotted to us, but thank you for staying connected, and let's the conversation continue. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you next time. Thank you.